Hope you're having a good day so far, and hopefully it's about to get even better now I've taken the stage. So just for introductions, I'm kind of going to talk about 4 things today. Firstly, just give you an overview of who I am, who our business, or what our business does, and the market that we operate in, just to give you some context. And the second thing I'll talk through is just the journey, kind of our export journey that we've been on to date. The third thing, and probably the most important thing for most of you here today who are exporting or thinking about exporting, is our learnings on that journey over the last few years. And then just to finish off, I'll talk about kind of where we're going now as a business. So hopefully that'll be an exciting journey for you. Okay, so who am I? So my name is Raman Sehgal, and I started a company called Ramarketing in 2009 from my spare bedroom about half a mile away from here in Gateshead. So not the most exciting startup journey that you hear these days. It was kind of a spare bedroom job in a flat. So, and what do we do? So we're a PR, digital and design agency that pretty much focuses on the life science and pharmaceutical sector. So what that means is companies come to us because we have expertise and speak the same language of the pharmaceutical sector. And so I think 80% of our business is in that space alone now, and that's allowed us to develop quite an interesting kind of niche. So the types of projects that we would work on would be companies coming to us because they weren't sure about their differentiation in the market, they had a terrible website, they couldn't generate leads, and all that type of thing. So that's a kind of typical business challenge a lot of our clients have. I suppose what makes us slightly different to a lot of similar types of companies is our sector specific focus, and that's the thing that's allowed us to kind of allow us to export over the last kind of few years. So we tend to work with R&D companies, manufacturing companies, technology companies who are all pretty much involved in drug development. So the market's estimated to be worth about $100 billion in the next few years, so it's a pretty interesting place for us to be. We're not worth that much, obviously, but one day. So hopefully that's given you like a brief bit of context of kind of what we do. So the reason I wanted to do that is kind of just share kind of the journey that we've now been on. So this was me on stage 2.5 years ago at the CBI event here in the Northeast, a regional event. Had more hair there, generally looked a bit happier before I had kids. And at that point, we had just kind of started exporting. So I was invited by Sarah and the guys just to come and just share our story on kind of why we decided to kind of export. And so what I'd kind of do is quickly recap what those reasons kind of are or were, and just again for companies or people here who are thinking about exporting, these were the kind of reasons that we decided to export. First and foremost, it was opportunity. So we were quite fortunate in that because of our specialism in the pharmaceutical sector, we were referred a piece of business or an opportunity in Denmark. We chucked everything at it and grabbed it with kind of 2 hands, and that was kind of the start of our export journey. It was kind of by chance, but actually it was down to the reputation that we'd built kind of in the sector. The second reason was kind of the niche positioning. So it was a bit of a penny dropping moment for us, in that kind of we realized we were kind of really onto something, that there was companies elsewhere in the world interested in what we did. So in that sense, it really reinforced our positioning in the market, and that we were doing something that was unusual, particularly for a Northeast business as well. Excitement was a big factor as well. So, we'd been used to doing business locally or, across the UK, and all of a sudden when someone from another country in the world wants to start spending money with you, that's pretty exciting, especially for a relatively young workforce. So we got to go on an aeroplane and go to Denmark, and that was very exciting. Little did I know that I'd probably be doing 50 flights a year for the next couple of years, but never mind. And the other kind of key thing was cash. And the reason that was on there is, or the reason that is on there is, we charged about 3 times for that project what we would have charged here in the Northeast, which was a kind of real eye-opener for us, that we could charge that kind of money. And what was interesting is once the project started and we got to know the buyer a lot better, he said, we nearly didn't win the project because we weren't expensive enough. So we thought we were really expensive, but actually relative to the market, we were pretty cheap. So there was a massive learning for us in terms of we'd built up this differentiation in the kind of pharmaceutical marketplace that actually held a premium wherever we went, but we didn't realize it until that opportunity came. So that was a key learning. So what I've brought is a bit of it's a kind of a rolling sales graph of 6-month increments at Ramarketing over the last 5 years. So it kind of what it does is it irons out any spikes in sales and stuff and gives you a real picture of growth. So the circle that I've just outlined there is actually when I was on stage 2.5 years ago when we just kind of started exporting. And you don't have to be a genius to realize where we've been. So it's been a pretty positive picture for us over the last kind of 2.5 years. And that's very much been down to export combined with kind of having a very strong niche market positioning. So if anyone there is thinking, I'm not sure about exporting, well, that's our journey. So I would suggest giving it a shot because it's been pretty awesome for our business. And again, I wanted to just outline some stats just to show you again over the last 2 years or 2.5 years where we have kind of changed as a business. So when I was here 2.5 years ago, we had 3 clients, three national clients, which seemed like a lot then, but now we've got 22. Which is an incredible kind of amount of growth in a sense. We now export to 15 countries, and when I was here last time it was just 3, and export's 40% of our turnover now compared to less than 5%. So, and I imagine it's going to be 50% plus next year. So it really has kind of accelerated the growth of our business, and these metrics kind of give you a good overview. Here's a map of the world if you've not seen one before, and the blue bits are where we are currently exporting, so we're not quite global in the sense that we're working with countries all over the world, but nevertheless, most of North America, Western Europe, and increasingly Asia is kind of where we're finding kind of our business. Or they're finding us, actually, which I'll come on to. And I just finally wanted to, for this section, just talk about my team and I. There's 8 of us attended an event recently called CPHI, which is kind of like the global event where all pharmaceutical people meet. It's incredibly exciting, as you can imagine. And what is quite interesting is just how things have changed in the last 2 years. So, well, for a start, 2 years ago, it was only me that went to the event, and there's 8 of us that went kind of this time, and we had 8 media interviews set up a couple of years ago, and we had 45 media interviews for our clients set up this time. And again, you can look at the stats in terms of just to give that picture of growth, and these metrics are actually quite important because it allows us to also see that we are progressing and going in the right direction. And that number 8 up there, I'll come back to that number because that's actually quite important for a point later on in the presentation. So this is probably the most, I imagine, useful part of the presentation, just to kind of give you an overview of what we've learned. So there's 5 things. And the first thing is, become world-class at something and then go and explore the world. So what that means is we kind of got very good at pharmaceutical PR and marketing, kind of in our own backyard, so to speak. And I think it's quite naive of companies to just turn up to a new market and expect to just be able to sell their products or services there. I think unless you've got to be able to offer something better than whatever is already there. And for us, because we developed this niche, it made us appealing and relevant to people irrespective of where we are. So our clients don't care where we are in reality, but it doesn't matter where their geography is, we have something to offer, which is why they came knocking in the first place. So I think before you start looking at exporting, get your product or your service at its best possible kind of level before you do that. So the second point is, be present and persistent and be patient, because, we were quite fortunate in that, it happened quite quickly. We got an export sale relatively soon, and for other companies it might just happen. But it can take a lot of time, and actually I look back to events and stuff I went a couple of years ago, it does take time to plant the seed and be where your buyers are and get them to understand what you do and actually, get them to associate you with something. So, as far as our buyers and prospector, I'm that weird marketing guy who does pharmaceutical marketing, and that's fine. Like, that's enough of a differentiation, because when they want to actually spend some money on marketing and invest in that kind of part of their business, they'll think, who do I know? And that's where we kind of come up. And the kind of CPHI stats that I showed you before, where I said there was 8 meetings in 2014, 2015, 4 of those meetings that we held then, 4 of those people are now clients. So 2 years later, it's taken that time, but actually just by being present and being persistent, it's allowed us to just position ourselves in the kind of right space. So the next one is about kind of being kind of a chameleon and understanding the nuances of the market that you're operating in. So as you start exporting more, you realize that certain markets, you have something to offer certain markets. So, for example, US companies come to us because we're based in the UK and we know the European pharmaceutical market really, really well. So we could try and rock up and try and compete with US agencies, but we don't really have that much to differ against them, other than we're British and we might be a bit more cost effective. But actually what we offer over them is real differentiation in Europe, and that's been our kind of springboard. And likewise, elsewhere in the world, we've worked out how to tailor our needs to whoever the market is. And I would advise, if you're thinking about exporting or exporting, is work out what they are, work out kind of what buttons to press when you're pitching or having a discussion. So the next one is about just, I suppose, respecting cultural differences, but what is kind of get the global basics right. So someone quite recently asked me, how do we deal with people culturally all over the world? And I kind of said, well, we don't really do anything. We just keep things very simple and don't go over the top. And it kind of got me thinking, what is it that we do? And in really basic terms, we're respectful, polite, and friendly, and that's pretty much it. And we listen, so when someone's talking, don't interrupt them. Doesn't matter where you go in the world, that's just absolute basics. And if you get those right, then you'll be onto something and people will start listening to whatever you've got to talk about as well. The other thing that I always think works quite well, so the 3 things actually which work quite well as conversation, common ground kind of start points, are food and drink. So a lot of our buyers are blokes in their 50s or 40s who like to have a drink, so we talk about beer or wine or whatever. Family, have you got kids, all that kind of stuff. And the other one is sport and football. As soon as we say we're from Newcastle, and Alan Shearer, yeah, we're still breaking ice all over the world through the entertainers in the 90s. It's actually pretty good for us. So just don't overcomplicate it, don't overthink it, irrespective of, and the guys at, DTI will give you some really good advice on how to deal with particular cultures, and definitely listen to it, but just get the basics right. And the final thing is kind of prepare to up your game, and kind of, it's not the little leagues anymore. And this has been a real, I suppose, blessing in disguise for our business, that, we're pitching against some of the best agencies in London, in Europe, in the States, who are as good as we are and actually know the space as well as we are. So all of a sudden, you've got to get very, very good at kind of what you do. And that's a really positive thing as well, because you just, we're quite progressive as a business, but it's made us kind of really up our game over the last kind of couple of years. And that's something, again, that's a real kind of added benefit of exporting. So actually, recently enough, we pitched against a company, and we've always been the kind of underdog, so we've always gone in with we're the hungriest for the business, all that type of thing. And the buyer turned around to me and said, well, you're definitely not the underdog, because we've had 5 separate recommendations for you guys. And it was a bit of a learning for me that actually all of a sudden we are now in our sector becoming a bit more established and grown up, which is actually really scary in lots of senses. But we're going to have to change our pitch as we get kind of more and more known as well. So hopefully that's been interesting, and that's some good learnings there that I've hopefully been able to share. So just to finish off, just for interest more than anything, just where we're going as a business. So that's our vision, is to be the go-to agency for the pharmaceuticals contract service space. So that's about the extent of our mission as a business, and we have competitors kind of in the States and in Europe, but we're looking to kind of conquer them. And quite recently we had some investments. So Fiona Cruikshank, OB, over there in the corner, is kindly invested in our business and is bringing business experience and sector expertise that will allow us to kind of take our business to the next level. And this is hopefully what our next level looks like. So in the intro, it mentioned that we had operations in the US. We don't actually yet. So this is what we're planning to do. So having an office in Boston or in New Jersey is what we're planning for in the next kind of 12 months. So I'm off with Simon and his team in the next couple of weeks to Boston to look at office space and that type of stuff. And Sarat's been kind enough to give us some great advice, and as have other entrepreneurs locally who've gone kind of on that journey already. And fingers crossed we'll manage to set up and not make too many mistakes. And I took a picture outside from near where we live a couple of days ago, which is kind of just a nice sunset, because God knows what's going to be in the next 2 years. But hopefully I'll be back in 2.5 years' time, where, like I was this time, just to share our journey, and hopefully it continues to be a positive one. Thank you. I'm not allowed to ask for questions yet, actually. Cheers.